Wrestling fans, I'm Dan Marty. You're not Tony Atlas.
I am not.
You have, well, I don't know. Do you have hair or you got a hat on?
I do have hair.
Well, Tony would look good with a detonation kick hat.
Well, yeah, I hope he would.
Yeah.
I would look good with Tony's muscles, so.
There you go, all right?
We can trade if he wants.
Wrestling fans, we try and keep you guessing. We had Vicky Guerrero not too long ago, and a brand new episode of Wrestling Insiders up next. TJP, stand by. Wrestling fans, we explode into Christmas for the 9th annual Paul Bearer Holiday Headlocks Toy Drive Cyber Fan Fest. A human sea of superstar guests have come to MWF Studios for live interviews, tributes, and virtual autograph signings. The good news is, if you miss these superstar signings, we have individual autograph photos available as well as all-inclusive VIP packages throughout the season. If you want them for yourself or to give as a holiday gift for Christmas, get the order in by December the 19th. On Christmas night, we'll reveal the winner of the massive Christmas Week Mega Raffle, where one lucky fan wins an entire jackpot of prizes, again, to benefit the Paul Bearer Holiday Headlocks Toy Drive. 2020 has been a brutal year for the economy, as well as our toy drive efforts. We could use any and all the help you could give us. Be part of the professional wrestling community. If you're going to take part in any toy drive this year, let it be one where we update Santa Claus's GPS and honor Paul Bearer's memory. Head on over to BostonWrestling.com now.
This is Mick Foley.
This is Harley Race.
This is Shelton Benjamin.
This is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
This is the Monster Abyss.
And this is Daniel Bryan.
This is JBL, and you're watching the MWF.
Be there live.
All right, wrestling fans, welcome to another all-new Wrestling Insiders. I'm Dan Marty, TJP. TJ, we've been trying to make this happen for a long time, my friend. I'm very happy to have you here with us.
It was quite a battle trying to get it done. What was it, like a 7-year gap, I think?
At least 2013. I remember way back then.
Yeah, and we initially touched base when, 2005?
I think it was April of 2005 at the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion. I was with my buddy, now known as the Viking Raider Ivar, out at the Cauliflower Alley Club, trying to get some people's attention at the great seminars that Les Thatcher and Harley Race would put on. And you, without those stunning good looks, you donned the hood and competed against a fellow, I believe, New Japan Dojo student in Yoshida.
Yeah, we tricked him into thinking State Line was Las Vegas that week. I remember it was really funny.
No, it would be really fun if I could dig, as I taped the match, we should dig the match up and play it as we're talking.
What I wish there was footage of our daytime rolling session that we did just for Harley and Les during the day. Yeah, we were just wrestling,
Oh, I thought you meant something else.
No.
Okay. All right, I took that the wrong way.
No, God, no. Yeah, we sat in on the camp as guests from New Japan, and Harley and Les, I don't know if they're just getting fed up with the guys in the ring or something like that.
They were. I remember.
Yeah, they asked us to get in the ring and just do our thing, and man, we beat the crap out of each other, and I think that's why they wanted to repeat it for the show that night. So.
Yeah, I tell you, that was it the Riviera that year? I think it was the Riviera.
Oh gosh, it was. No, I think it was the Plaza, maybe.
Where Back to the Future, the scene was shot. Right, you know what? You're right. It was down in Old Vegas because you used to have to take the
Palace or whatever.
You had to take the bus to get back and forth to the main street. So you got a better memory than I do. Well, again, this is something we've been working on for a while, if you couldn't tell. And then when you were, I think, doing Suicide in TNA, we had talked back and forth around then too, because I believe my buddy Billy Anderson, didn't he do a little training with him at one point when you were really young?
Yeah, the first gym I ever went to was Bill and Jesse Hernandez. And then they split up and each had their own gym, and I trained at both of them, and Bill spent a lot of time in Bill's ring. He was one of my initial primary mentors, I guess.
I hate to say it, I haven't read his book yet. But I'd like to read his book because he's a phenomenal guy.
Fascinating story.
I've only got to know through the Cauliflower Alley Club, which is another reason why, if you're unfamiliar with it, you should check out caulifloweralleyclub.org to find out about this great nonprofit organization that helps out the athletes of yesteryear and the king of sports professional wrestling, but just a non-stop encyclopedia of wrestling experiences and stories, not just around here, but you're talking about around the globe.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I mean, just the amount of generations that he's been a part of, and Jesse too, and you know, obviously with them as partners, and then yeah, there's so many guys that they've had a part in their career, or just, you know, a story to share or something like that. So
great guy. Hopefully I'll see Bill out there in April of 2020, but we'll see how that goes. I got to talk to you. 2020, it's an interesting time in the landscape that is professional wrestling right now.
Quite.
You're living it. You're not just talking about it, you're living it. I mean, look at WWE, so many brands right now. You have AEW getting a foothold on national cable television. Impact is really, from a quality point of view, starting to make a rebound from some tough times they went through. You have Major League Wrestling with a platform, NWA with a platform. I mean, there's a lot of wrestling options right now. Ring of Honor, how did I forget about them? What do you think? I mean, you're out on the road every weekend. How do you feel about where we stand right now in a really, I think, an interesting time? Where it goes from here, I don't know, but...
Gosh, I mean, it's kind of unprecedented. If you could draw a comparison, it'd be like...
The territory days back in the 80s?
It almost reminds me of going back to the late stages of the territories when there was still a handful of tentpole places that felt like big, you know, territory names before they all kind of got, you know, shuttled under one umbrella or just folded, you know. And it's like that again, but taking that and giving them all a mainstream platform as opposed to just regional, you know. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's unprecedented. And the last time we had something even close to this was, you know, what, like the Monday night years, as they say, with you know, WCW and WWF. I still call it WWF.
We were talking about that a few minutes ago. Yep. And, I'm still a WWF guy.
And ECW,
yep.
You know, like right behind them. You know, and it's been a while since just then, and now there's twice as many options as that.
For everybody to go and earn a full-time living, which no matter if you love a certain promotion, if you hate a certain promotion, or if you're somewhere in the middle, the best thing for this industry is to have as many places where you can earn a full-time living as possible, because that means the industry is healthy.
Yeah. A lot of teams to play for now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but what fascinates me is that it seems like so many of these groups right now are surviving off of the benefit of the television platforms they have. You look around attendance-wise, other than maybe AEW where it's a new promotion, but nobody's really knocking them dead at the box office right now, which makes it even more interesting to me that they're having so much success with whether it be a digital platform or a television platform.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like we reached an era where it's not dominated by one specific, you know, personality.
Right.
I feel like, you know, for those of us that have, like, I know I look young, but I'm a sprightly 35-year-old and a historian beyond that, I guess, for our industry. But like every generation, you take, you know, a 5 to 10 year period, and it's kind of anchored by a personality. You know, there's promotions that are there and doing what they do and whatever, but it's always anchored by a personality, whether it's San Martino, Hogan, you know, and so on and so forth through the generations, Austin and Brett, and Brock, Angle, whoever. And now we've kind of reached a time where in order to be personality driven, they sort of like re-up retro acts from the past. Now it's kind of like just wrestling in general, the platform of professional wrestling is what is drawing people, because everybody has their favorite, you know, thing, and it's not dominated by any one person.
And it's been a long time since it has been.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go back to the peak of Cena, but, and I don't want to offend my good friend John Cena Sr., but you know, it certainly wasn't the same as some of the other talents that you'd mentioned in that long list.
I mean, God, I really feel like he's like the last
of the Mohicans.
Yeah, man. John's like the last guy. You know, after that, I mean, I feel like Roman is kind of like the next closest thing. You know, he's got all the tools and the traits, and he's kind of like right there. But man, after Rock and John, I mean, they just
big drop off.
Yeah, it's the entire culture of that has changed. The engine is different now. You know, it's like going from gas to electric. I mean, it's just totally different.
And before we even get to where we are now in 2020, where things, you know, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. There was some really, not just a year or two, but several years of tough times, starting at the top, all the way down to the bottom on the independents. More than anything, I think if anyone's really rebounded, it's been the independents. I don't know if it's because maybe NXT made it cool again around 2015 when it went on the network, and like, whoa, these are all these underground type wrestlers. It's cool to go to these shows instead of laughing at them. But I think the independents, maybe as far as on a percentage base, as far as what's being done, quality groups at least, I mean, there's been a real enhancement as far as how many people are showing up to support the groups. And that, again, that's great for the local independent talents trying to get to the television programs we just mentioned.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, NXT kind of retroactively invented the indies.
There you go. Okay, I like that.
They kind of retconned the origin of it, I guess.
That's a great phrase. I might have to steal that. I like that.
I mean, that's reality, though. I mean, they provided a platform to, I don't want to say genre, because I think wrestling is wrestling. I don't really agree that there's different necessarily styles. I feel like everybody's doing the same thing, and it's just decorated a little bit differently. But the entity that is independent wrestling, they sort of just gave a mainstream platform for, so they people that weren't exposed to it now look to them as the origin of what they're now learning. But you know, like you had said, it went in waves. You know, there was the indie boom of like 2004 around then, and then you know
we had a bump there.
Yeah, there was a peak there and a valley after, and you know, I feel like maybe 2010-ish, like there's a new generation of guys that were starting to come up, and then it kind of had another boom similar to that one. But really, NXT kind of cracked like through a different wall and exposed it to like a greater part of the world, which, you know, as far as if you're going to retcon anything or retroactively rewrite history, I think that's a positive way to do it, because in the end, it exposes it to more people. We'll
take the help any way we can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it's been a while. I mean, you've had so many full-time contracts over the past 10 years or so.
Yeah.
You really have been around the independents. It's been a while for you. Do you get that type of vibe now that you're on the road a lot of the weekends doing indies, along with New Japan and Impact and everything else?
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's like I have to learn how to be a wrestler all over again.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, when the last time I was really like on the indies and like free from a contract for an extended period of time, it was 2009 or 10.
10 years,
you know,
okay.
and I around that time I went to Lucha Libre USA, the MTV show. I did a couple seasons there, and then right from there went to Ring of Honor. Was under contract for a couple years there. Then TNA, Impact Wrestling for 3-4 years. Then I had about a summer to myself where I really just kind of went back to Mexico, and then I wasn't going to stay in WWE when I did the tournament. Regal kind of talked me into it. But, you know, I ended up there for 3 more years. And before I knew it, 2010 became 2019.
Yeah.
And the indies were not like that before. Like in 2009, 10, it wasn't how it is now. I mean, just the nature of social media and things like that. Guys are a different type of entrepreneur now that they weren't at that time.
Definitely.
I mean, I remember when I started back in 98, it was different for people just to have merchandise. Like,
right, yeah. No one
having
ever had their own merchandise.
Having a T-shirt, that's for WWF, WCW guys. You didn't see that. There was no merch
You had
table,
some
usually.
ex-WWF guys, as we call them, doing Polaroids and 8x10s for $5 a pop.
Yeah.
That was pretty much your merchandise. Maybe a little, you know, program for $2, but that was about it.
Yeah, there wasn't much, and you know, shows weren't really being. Not every promotion would tape their shows. If they did, it wasn't on DVD yet because that was kind of a new medium. You know?
In '98, I don't even think there were DVDs, right?
Yeah, no, it was brand new, and you know, there's just a lot of things about the game that has changed, like technologically speaking. Now it's like guys have their own brand lines and all kinds of stuff like that, and it's incredible like how much that changes the game, and the way that technology now with like social medias and YouTube and, you know, digital streaming services, that changes distribution. So now there's different types of levels of exposure for guys, which, you know, lends itself to more major companies now popping up, like an MLW or Impact having like alternate routes while they, you know, reassess their distribution deal over the course of a few years. Like, there's so many avenues for guys now, and like I have to learn it just like everybody else.
And it's still growing and it's still expanding. It's still new, you know? I mean, this boom as far as the technology and the platforms to present the products on, it's still kind of a new thing when you look at it. I mean, what was the internet 20 years ago, other than maybe, that little dial-up with that lousy noise and waiting to hear you got mail once you finally connected to AOL or something like that. But, I always wonder, what would a promotion of like ECW or Smoky Mountain or those niche groups that it felt like at some point were almost so close to being able to survive, but it didn't happen, whether it was the look they had compared to WCW and WWF back in the 90s, or just the fan base wasn't big enough. If they were ever able to reach literally every eyeball that had a computer in their home, what could that have meant for them? And I think that would have been really interesting to see if we were able to go back in the old wrestling time machine.
There are some places that it became the building blocks of what's popular now, like, for example, Torimon to Dragon Gate, something like that, like in Japan. And now, through, the medium of what the internet is now, people are now going back in time and seeing that. And there's this whole retroactive fandom for that because of what they're fans of now. And it's like, man, like, there are some places, like you had mentioned, that they're so close, like on a timeline, speaking of their timeline, they're so close to having that medium, but they just miss it. And like an ECW or a Smoky Mountain. I even think, like, what about like Memphis back in the day?
Yeah.
Like the amount of personalities and the type of engine that they had, those shows and stuff. Like, what if they had like an infrastructure that was built around social media and people having all kinds of access to it? Like, how much bigger it could have been. So places like that, I mean, it could be amazing.
Look at the television ratings that small little tiny promotion in the middle of Tennessee was putting out every week. Now, would that have translated nationally? I don't know. I don't know if the Memphis style in Boston would have been a big to-do. But I certainly think there was a lot of room for growth outside of Tennessee.
Yes.
Especially down throughout the South. In the South, believe it or not, to some people that don't think life exists, east of the Mississippi, the South is a big place.
Very big, very big. Yeah, but I mean, like the type of personalities that they had come through there. I mean, like some of, like Randy Savage, there's different guys like that are, I feel like, translatable to any demographic, obviously, because a lot of these guys went on to become worldwide stars. And it's like, if they had a different level of exposure, man, like the translation could have been awesome.
If you even want to go further back, just again talking the 80s, imagine if it was an even playing field back, when WWF tried to make their big coup and buy everybody out or put them out of business. Imagine if it was just based upon the quality, how that battle might have gone,
Yeah.
If it was more than just who has the slickest looking TV, who has the, the biggest guys on the show. I mean, for a while in Boston, funny enough, a short period of time, but enough to make a point, World Class was actually doing a better TV rating than WWF, right in its own backyard. So to me, that says there was certainly room for all of these different promotions to get a lot of love outside of their own individual territory.
Yeah, definitely. Really makes you wonder what the difference it would make just to have that little bit of change in distribution, because it makes a world of difference now.
To me, it would have even been more frustrating if I was in charge of a company that was right on the cusp of it and just missed it. Someone that was around, geez, we were doing really good, but YouTube didn't come around until 2 or 3 years after the fact. I think that would be even more disappointing than talking about something in the 80s and 90s. You know what I mean? They didn't have a chance at this.
I never sat down and asked them, but I bet Paul Heyman's kicking himself. Like, man,
could you imagine imagine what ECW would have been if there was YouTube?
Like, man, if I would have squeezed just a couple more years out of it just to catch that, like, because some of that stuff is still viral to this day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it became viral,
after the fact.
After it died,
Or even some of those crazy, I used to get a kick out of watching them back in the 90s, the FMW type groups, when they were running the fire matches and those crazy types of things you couldn't imagine were actually real. Then you see it for the first time, and then you see it a second time, it's like, you see it a third time, and it's like,
well, I mean,
once you've seen it, you've seen it.
Some guys, though, like their personality, like they get lumped in with the content, and people don't realize like how great of a personality they were. and that if more people were exposed to it, like how that could have translated outside of that genre, like take like Onita or something like that. I mean, there are guys that like you look at, it's like, man, these guys are like badass as characters. Like you look at them and it's like, man, the narrative behind this guy is awesome. I could really get behind this. But at the time you weren't thinking of it because you're like, oh, he's just with these guys, you know?
Yep.
And it's like, that place does a lot of talking. This place breaks a lot of light tubes. This place just does hammerlocks the whole time. But, you know, within those pockets, there's guys that really could have translated like outside of their own pool, but, you know, they just kind of missed the boat if nobody's seen it.
I hear you on that 110%. So speaking of rewinding, we'll go back to your journey into wrestling. Unlike you, I didn't get in the ring and actually work, but I was 13 when I got involved with Boston Bad Boy Tony Rumble's promotion here in Boston. You actually started training in a professional wrestling ring.
Yeah.
Barely a teenager. What got you interested in wrestling as a kid, and what made you try and actually get to that point where you were training to actually do it?
Well, let's see. I mean, like anybody, I grew up on wrestling. My earliest memories of like being, God, almost a baby, like 2-3 years old, was watching Saturday night's Main Event with my dad.
Oh, you were watching in those, the NBC shows?
Yeah, I remember the old...
that. To me, that, not to interrupt, but that was the greatest wrestling. It wasn't a weekly show, but that was the greatest wrestling show. I wish someone could try and say, instead of a 2-hour, 3-hour, or a 1-hour show, let's do 90 minutes. Memphis did for a while, but for the national audience, I think that's the only 90-minute wrestling show there's ever been on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's
perfect.
It's a weird.
Perfect.
I feel like people look at it like a weird block, but it's a nice amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my earliest memories of wrestling on TV is like that old show opening with the WWF logo flying over the water and like coming up the steel gradient logo that they used to have, you know. So around that time, you know, was what came up on as a baby, and then you know, I grew up kind of, I know it's weird, I always thought I would be a wrestler. I don't know how to describe, other than simply saying it kind of chose me. I don't really know how to explain it.
You always wanted it.
I just not even that I wanted it, I always assumed that's what I will be later. I assumed everybody would be. I thought everybody loved wrestling.
You thought everybody was going to become a professional wrestler at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I knew damn well that there were firemen and doctors in the world, but I mean, in my head, I thought everybody looked at wrestling the same way that I did. And it wasn't, I never thought as a kid, I got to find a way to get there. I always thought, someday I'll be doing this. Like, it was just a flat out 100% like assumption that that's what that's where I'll end up. And I don't know why, it just was that way. And then, I don't know, when I was about 11, 12 years old, and you do projects in school, or you're starting to get a little older now, so you do career like preparation projects and stuff like that. And I would always choose wrestling, and I would always obviously predictably get the worst responses from teachers and stuff like, this is not realistic, and you know, yada yada yada. So I thought, you know, I feel like 9 out of 10 kids then change course. Okay, I got to think about something else. But I just looked at that as, well, I got to think of how to make it realistic. So what would be the realistic steps? So, you know, I started writing to wrestling schools and things like that. I was about 13. I thought, because again, like without the internet, there's no roadmap for it. So I just remember thinking, okay, Flair, all these guys were amateur wrestlers before, so I must just have to do amateur wrestling, and the answer will come to me through that. So I remember summer before my first year of high school, I went into the office of my new school and asked them about the amateur program. They had gotten rid of it. They didn't have an amateur wrestling program anymore. And so I thought, okay, well, my plan was to do this and try to pro wrestle after, I don't know, college or something like that. So I figured I got to start now. So I wrote all those letters to places I'd read in like PWI magazine, you know, All Pro Wrestling in San Francisco, or I think Dean Malenko had one in Tampa. There's some in Ohio, different places.
Sometimes you get the best leads on things like that out of the B magazine. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the after ones, you know, the classifieds, they were there. But if you'd get like Main Event or one of those, you know, the bootleg magazines, all the black and white ones, sometimes you'd have some very interesting classified listings for wrestling things. That's how I found my buddy. I don't know if you ever read it, but him and Paul Bear and Dennis Brent, this is probably too old for you, but I was in the 8th grade. It was probably a year or so before I started with Tony Rumble. They put a book together about what does it take to get into wrestling, and they had a list of probably 30 wrestling schools around the country. And to me, it was, oh my, look at all this. And again, there was no internet back in probably talking 92, so it was like a Bible at one point. Until little did I know, this TV studio a year later would help guide me to Tony Rumble's world, and the rest for me is history. But yeah, you used to have to really dig through those magazines sometimes to get a morsel of information.
I'd be collecting exactly what you said, those like little black and white like ads and things that were like half a page or just the corner of something, you know, and so yeah, I wrote to all of them. I remember writing to Shawn Michaels' school, which hadn't opened yet, just it was advertising their first class. But being 13 and all that, like, you know, most of these places, especially at that time, that was kind of unheard of. You didn't just let anybody train at that time. You had to be 18, sometimes 21. It was really I still feel like the business is this way. It's really for post-college age people, because it's an experience game. You have to be able to understand the world, really, and yourself. So, you know, there was no feasible way to go to any of these places. But luckily, just being in Los Angeles, there's a lot of lucha libre culture, and you know, just like with boxing, with you know, Mexican wrestling, if you can walk and you're old enough to get in the ring, then they'll let you do it, and you can sink or swim. They'll just throw you into the fire, and thankfully I survived. But that was really how I got my start. You know, Bill and Jess, they had a lucha libre style of gym, the way that they would take on students, and so you know, they let me come in at an early age, and there was a lot of places like that locally. And so once I got in one gym, I went to every gym I could find. I would just ask people, where's there another place? Where's there another place? And just I blinked, and now I'm here with you.
That's, you know, not that I have done anywhere near what you've done, but there's a lot of similarities in the story. What did your parents think?
Well, they didn't really keep tabs on me, you know.
They didn't keep tabs that you were training at a professional wrestling school at 13. They kind of went under the radar.
No, yeah, my parents, they worked for the airlines.
Oh, okay.
So, you know,
that says it all.
they worked for TWA, and then later my dad got out of the business. My mom moved on to American when they had the buyout, but they were always gone for weeks at a time. So
wow, okay.
You know, my sister and I, we kind of learned to fend for ourselves at an early age. I could do laundry when I was like 10 years old and fix foods and things like that for myself. So they never really gave us curfews growing up, and we never got into any trouble. So when I started doing, you know, this, and they never really kept tabs on stuff like that. They just, you know, I would ditch school on Friday mornings and catch a ride with somebody to a show that night, maybe in LA or something like that, and then ask around the locker room who's on the show in, you know, Vegas or San Francisco Saturday night. I would ride with them there. Okay, who's going to Phoenix Sunday? No, oh, you? Okay, I'm jumping in with you. And then I need to get back to LA Monday morning and go to school, so who's got to go back to LA? Okay, I'll ride with you. And then I would just show up back to school, and they never asked where I was. I just did what I did.
I always found it strange that so many in the business trying to break in that don't have their driver's license, but to those of us that weren't legally able to have one, it really posed a real challenge trying to get to some of these places, especially if it wasn't, you know, 2 or 3 cities away from you, sometimes 2 or 3 states away from you.
Yeah, no Ubers.
No Ubers, no.
No MapQuest.
No MapQuest. I remember I thought it was so cool when, I don't even know if MapQuest was the original name of it, but when you were able to get directions off the internet for the first time and print it on a sheet of paper. I remember back my senior year of high school was when the internet really started to become a class at school. We'd have these shows coming up with Tony. I'm like, oh my God. It tells you line by line, it tells you which way to turn.
Yeah.
It tells you how many miles. This is the greatest thing. And I would have literally every stop we'd have, I'd print the sheets so I had them ready to know how to get from my house the quickest way to the different buildings. And I mean, look at it now. All you have to do is
really
press a couple buttons and someone even talks to you and tells you how to do it.
Took the Thomas Guide out of our hands.
Right, yeah.
I remember writing stuff down on napkins, you know, and you make a mistake, and most guys didn't have cell phones at that time in '98 still, so you would use a payphone or pull over and ask somebody at the gas station. That's the way it was.
I was the first kid in my school that had a cell phone. It was one of those big brick bad boys, and it was $30 a month for 20 minutes. But just in case of an emergency or something like that, you know what I mean? Because when, like I say, you go in state to state sometimes, as people nowadays know, you know, even for safety sometimes, to be able to communicate with people is a good thing. But you couldn't text on it. It had a very little tiny one-line LED display, and it had a big plastic antenna that came out, the little gimmick that came down by the lip, and it probably weighed 2 pounds, but that was the device.
Yeah, a slight step up from the pager.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh, this is like a walk down memory lane. You should be interviewing me. So what did the guys at the school think? Kid walks in, were you 8th, 9th grade?
Let's see. That would have been 9th grade.
9th grade?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they have any hesitation about letting a freshman in high school train at the school in the ring? Were they worried about liabilities? This was probably a little bit before the world became as Sue happy as it is nowadays. But
quite a bit. Quite a bit before then. No, it was still the Wild West at that time. So, yeah, if you got in the ring, you're a grown man like everybody else, whether you liked it or not. So I took my fair share of ass beatings every night.
Were there any other students at the school anywhere near your age range? Or?
No, not many. I mean, there were some that maybe were like 18, 19, maybe 17, but nobody that was like
really?
13, 14.
Oh, that's a big gap.
No, yeah.
Wow. And you felt
most of the people were late 20s. I mean, they were grown men in their prime, so yeah.
Were you comfortable?
I mean, as comfortable as anybody would be. I don't know. I fell into it really naturally. I never had to be told twice to do anything or how to do anything. I was pretty good at it, kind of right away. I took a lot of crap kickings, but otherwise, it was pretty easy for me. I think because I was able to perform and do what needs to be done, that they cut me a lot of slack that they wouldn't have otherwise cut other people. So that kind of saved me.
At what point did you say to yourself, you know what? This is the magic. This is what I know you said when you were a kid, you always felt like it was just something you were going to do.
Yeah.
At what point did you feel like this is it? I mean, this is something I'm really becoming good, great, and now exceptional at in 2020?
God, I don't know if I ever reached that, I think that might be the reason for my longevity is just because I still feel like the kid that came into the gym on that first day.
Really?
In
That's
many
great.
ways, yeah.
Yeah.
People ask me what my favorite match ever was of mine. And I always say the next one, because I mean, it all goes by so fast, and I don't really, I don't think of, myself historically in that way, like my own timeline, like checkpoints that I've reached is just, I still feel like first day, I'm still looking forward to Fridays, all week long. I just think, man, I just gotta get to Friday night.
It's a little easy to get to the shows now, though.
A little bit
easier to get around from city to city. Now, this is great. Wrestling fans, you've learned a little bit about this tremendous professional athlete, what it took to break into the business at such a young age. I'm enjoying the conversation a great deal. Just want to take a quick time out. We come back. We're going to learn more about his more well-known escapades in the King of Sports. We'll be back after this brief time out. Wrestling fans, we explode into Christmas for the 9th annual Paul Bearer Holiday Headlocks Toy Drive Cyber Fan Fest. A human sea of superstar guests have come to MWF Studios for live interviews, tributes, and virtual autograph signings. The good news is, if you miss these superstar signings, we have individual autograph photos available as well as all-inclusive VIP packages throughout the season. If you want them for yourself or to give as a holiday gift for Christmas, get the order in by December the 19th. On Christmas night, we'll reveal the winner of the massive Christmas Week Mega Raffle, where one lucky fan wins an entire jackpot of prizes, again, to benefit the Paul Bearer Holiday Headlocks Toy Drive. 2020 has been a brutal year for the economy, as well as our toy drive efforts. We could use any and all the help you could give us. Be part of the professional wrestling community. If you're going to take part in any toy drive this year, let it be one where we update Santa Claus's GPS and honor Paul Bearer's memory. Head on over to BostonWrestling.com now. All right, wrestling fans, welcome back, Wrestling Insiders. I'm Dan Marty. Tony Atlas is, I guess, best said on assignment this episode, and we have a great conversation with Mr. TJP. Do you get that a lot? Do they throw the Mr. in before the three letters?
give him the old Mr. is my father's name, you know.
Oh, there you go. All right. So he's Mr. P then. All right.
Yeah,
We'll give him the
actually,
respect he deserves.
It is my father's name. Teddy, I got this here on my hand because it's I'm a junior, so it's my dad's name as well. So he's also TJP, but I'd rather him be the Mr.
You know, relatively new to your body are all these tattoos. What got you to the point where you wanted to ink up?
Well, you know, it's funny. We mentioned me being, you know, trapped in the mainstream machine for 10 years. And that's really what the deal was. When I got early 20s, I'd already knew what I wanted to do then. But, you know, you get in and, you know, some places want to make action figures and have reference shots and things like that. And then they ask you to hold off. And then pretty soon that job leads to a new job. And then they're the same way. And they got shirts and figures and things they want to do, and then the next place, and then the next place. So pretty soon, you know, before I knew it, at 23 became 33, and yeah, I finally just knocked on the door of the office, said, "Guys, I'm a grown man. I got to be able to handle my own life." And they said, "Sure, just yeah, let us know what you want to do." And so I told them and started getting it all done.
At one point in WWF, WWE, the tattoos were really hated. So that's one thing I've seen kind of evolve
They might
throughout
still
the
be,
industry nowadays.
And they might still be, but for me, it was always fine. You know, I wasn't going to get like the F word on my eyeball or something like that, but yeah, so.
I like the Welcome to Vegas one. I noticed that in the picture when we were building up to the show.
Yeah. This arm is all landmarks of my life and career, and things like that. You know, I have you know, LA right here, the Philippines. I have Vegas and Kansas City on my arm. I have something for Canada, Japan, and Mexico. I have the Santa Monica Pier. I have the freeway sign from the town I grew up in Southern California right here. And then on my chest, the script is actually writing from Antonio Inoki. It was written on the wall in the dojo. You know, when I was recruited by New Japan, I was 17, and that was really like I'd already been traveling and wrestling for maybe 3-4 years at that time, but that was like really like my first big break into like, you know, the road. And coincidentally enough, the name of the writing is titled The Road, and it's really just about, you know, taking your first step and not being afraid, not even knowing your destination, because, you know, pretty soon your path will forge itself, and you know, you're going to have this life story, and that's really what it's about. It's not having any fear and just moving forward and letting that path take shape, and that's really what all of this is all about. And everything on this arm is all inspirations for my life. You know, obviously I have my dad here, and you know, different stuff. I have you know, this one is for my wife, and I have different things. I have like bands and movies and different stuff like that. I wish I had gotten a chance to catch Vicky, because I have you know, Eddie Guerrero's fire from his tights right here.
Really?
Yeah, I have Eddie and Sean, Tiger Mask. That's really like the guys that had the biggest influence on me creatively, and you know, like that sort of thing. And
remember to show that to her tomorrow, because she's very interested in having a chance to talk with you. I was kind of, not that I'm an expert on your story by any stretch of the imagination, but she's much more old school than you might ever think, based upon her history and life history. And I was talking a little bit about you, and I said, I think you'd really enjoy having a conversation with them. And she said, I think so too. So especially having that right on your arm, I bet she'd enjoy it even more. I was a little disappointed, though, where you are, Mr. Las Vegas now. We had this beautiful mural across the room from us painted, and you didn't even notice it. But, you know, we wanted you to feel like you were at home.
Yeah,
people at home have no idea what we're talking about. We'll have to take a picture. But that's got to be...
There's a giant mural for people that can't see it, but right here where my hands are pointing is a giant mural of the Strip in Las Vegas.
It's got to be about 20 feet, right?
Yeah. The thing is, I'm always going to be an LA boy at heart. So, you know, when I see Vegas, it's like seeing the New York skyline. You know, like I recognize it as a landmark. I don't recognize it as a landmark that I actually live in. At least not yet. Maybe I need to be there for like, you know, 10 more years or something before it like kind of hits me.
What made you want to move there?
I just, you know, I owned a home in Southern California, and coming out of the recession, like flipping that home is actually what really kind of got my family back on its feet. You know,
Really?
prior
Okay.
when I was homeless, you know, getting back to California and you know, through, you know, God very much blessed me with being able to get some of my wrestling jobs back, and yeah, that permitted me to get a home, and then, you know, flipping that is really what kind of saved us a lot. And yeah, I just needed to pick a new place to live, and told my better half she can pick. Yeah,
So it was her pick, really?
yeah, she's
All right.
got a best friend out there, so.
Were you hesitant at all about Vegas or no?
No, I just needed as long as I have an airport. LA is always going to be home for me. Family's all still there. I'm still in LA half the time in my life. It's almost like it's not really my home in Vegas, but you
It's
know.
not that far away.
And yeah, that's the thing, is it's literally the next closest big city. It's only a couple hours away.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an easy choice.
Do you enjoy living there?
Yeah, I like it. Speed of life is nice. It's quiet and slow when you want it to be, but obviously it's a big city in a compact form if you want it to be exciting. So yeah, it's a nice mix of both things.
Were you happy you didn't leave the West Coast when you gave her that option to pick?
Yeah, I'm glad. I don't like humid weather, you know.
Yeah.
It's weird though, for being a California boy, I don't really like the sun that much. I like gloomy weather. I just like
Do you?
it, but I like it dry.
Okay.
So as long as it's not humid, I'm fine with it being hot. I can't stand humidity. So
I was kind of blown away when during the commercial break you mentioned that you had snow out in Vegas
yeah,
last
we had a
year.
little
I didn't
bit.
remember seeing that on the
Last
news.
couple years, yeah.
When I was with your buddy Rich Swan a few years back for, I think it was New Year's week in 13, I couldn't believe how cold it got at night.
Yeah.
But I never had seen the snow out in Vegas, and that's other than when I take the kids on our Orlando trips. Vegas is my favorite destination, and that was odd to hear.
Yeah, the people don't realize how cold the desert gets, you know.
Yeah.
Like that wide open plain and the you know, the valley. In some cases, the temperature really drops in the wintertime. I mean, it's not like it's like 18 degrees or something like that, like it would be in like Chicago consistently. But you know, I mean, 30 degrees kind of
You need a winter coat.
it shocks you
Yeah.
when you're on the West Coast. It kind of shocks people's system a little bit. Yeah.
Now, I know you're a big hoops fan. Do you think
Very
now
much.
that professional sports have kind of taken over the city, do you think eventually beyond the summer league they have at MGM, do you think there'll ever be an NBA team in Vegas?
They should just move the Suns there. Phoenix is such a bad sports town. I hate saying it, but it is. Like, they always struggle with their teams. I feel like the Cardinals kind of do okay. Man, like the hockey team and the basketball team, they could find new places. Or the Kings. I think the Sacramento Kings need to get out of Sacramento.
Yeah. You know what? That's another one that's not too far away.
Yeah.
Is Raider fever hit the city yet?
A bit, yeah. But Raider fever was kind of already there because, I mean, like I said, we're so close to California, and you know, we're only a few hours from LA, and it's really close to the Bay Area too. It's kind of like a weird triangular in between, and so we have a lot of Bay Area fans there too. So you know, there's a lot of Laker fans, there's a lot of Raider fans there. So there's kind of a seamless transition for the Raiders, I think, for going to there, because a lot of their people are there.
When I was out for the CAC this past year, I drove by in an Uber, I think, and looked like the stadium was coming along. I saw a video within the past week, I think, on maybe YouTube or Facebook or something like that, and it looks really nice.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. They have this window, this automated window where the actual wall of the stadium opens up, and it's a direct view of the Strip. So you know,
Really?
it's right across the freeway, so you can see the Strip right through the window. So they can open it and close it. You know, I figured you just leave it open the whole time, but yeah. So the night games are gonna have some incredible like camera shots and different things.
Oh,
and
the TV networks will love
and
it.
the atmosphere inside the stadium's gonna be awesome.
Oh, that sounds. Now I want to go. Is it 2020 or 2021?
Next season, Raiders.
2020?
they
Oh, that's
played their
right. Yeah, they
last
just
game.
shut down Oakland. That
Yeah.
pathetic baseball park they play.
That was a rough send-off for the Raiders there. Yeah.
Well, you know, about as sincere as a mother-in-law's kiss. There were a lot of people that were hurt by that one.
They wonder why they're moving.
No kidding, right? No kidding. All right, well, we do tend to shy away from wrestling sometimes when different topics pop up. But again, you mentioned teenager, New Japan Dojo. That's not like a cut and rank professional wrestling school where it's almost like signing up for Little League Baseball. You pay a couple $100 and you're guaranteed to play a couple of innings. What led such a young man at that point to be able to even make his way into the New Japan Dojo? And we'll take a long dramatic pause for that water sip. I'll cover the dead silence there right now. I'll keep talking. You can have another gulp if you want.
No, it's fine. I really it was just kind of serendipity, so to speak, I guess. At the time, when I was about, 15, 16 years old, I was in UPW. That's where John Cena got his start.
Okay, yep.
And for those that are younger wrestling fans, before NXT, there was a series of developmental places that were basically what NXT is now, but they were just in different places. And originally, one of the very first ones was, UPW in Los Angeles. And I was lucky enough to get in and be there. I was training in the facility, and I would do the local show. So it'd kind of be like having a 15-year-old kid on NXT on USA and then in the PC. But obviously I wasn't really in line for contract being just a kid, but I was good enough to it was like being on scholarship, And shortly after, a few years later, shortly after UPW and the WWF at the time cut ties, UPW being business-minded wanted to, sister up with another wrestling, tentpole, so they chose 01. And 01 at the time was a brand new company from Japan, and it was kind of created from offshoots of New Japan roster, and the Inoki family was sort of a business go-between, and they had wanted to open up an extension of New Japan, which was still Antonio Inoki's company at the time. And they basically just kind of recruited guys to be the first class, like X-Men first class, I guess. They just looked for guys that had the traits that kind of resembled really what their system was all about. And myself, Rocky Romero, Ricky Reyes, we were the first guys. And then a little bit later, Brian Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, as people know him, joined us. And we were the first group of the new generation of Gaijin wrestlers, so...
Did you realize then what an honor it was? Were you smart enough for the business at that point? Yeah.
When I was getting into wrestling, I was a fan of, WWF, WCW growing up. Some of the later NWA stuff before was really like WCW. But what I really, really liked when it came time to do it was New Japan. Like, I didn't grow up wanting a WrestleMania moment. I grew up wanting to be in the Super J Cup. I grew up wanting to be in a New Japan Junior. To me, and to this day, that's still, I think that's like the greatest thing you could be in wrestling. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think that that's something everybody should or would think, but for me, that's it. Like, being there, doing that, to me, that's playing for the Lakers. So getting to do that right out of high school, I mean, that was like, it felt like I was like Kobe Bryant. Like man, I just got drafted to the team I grew up watching, wanted to be part of, and here I am doing it. Like 18 English class to the Tokyo Dome, like that, and so it hit me like a ton of bricks, but yeah, I knew exactly, what it meant to be there, and still what it is, for anybody who can be there, because it's one of the very few, I think, systems left that still has a certain, I don't want to say prestige, but like a prestige to it. There's a certain discipline and prestige with it, and it's sort of timeless. I feel like CMLL is the same way too. But yeah, I knew at the time the gravity of it. I was very much blessed with good timing on that.
So you were already so familiar with it. At what point in your life did you start to come across New Japan Pro Wrestling? I mean, I can't imagine that every kid in your middle school were fans of New Japan back then. I mean, I'm sure it took a little effort to try and get to it.
Well,
was it on TV?
I mean, you get a little bit of exposure from seeing guys like Great Muta and Chono on like WCW television, so stuff like that. And you'd see like Sting go overseas, and it's like, well, who's he wrestling for in Japan? When you see him in magazines or like some of the footage, and then so you sort of start to connect the dots there, and then you see the coverage in the magazines, and then the video games, stuff like that. So then, through that is really how I got exposed to it. And then, just like like anybody else, when you're into wrestling, you seek out as much of it as you can. So I would get a lot of tapes. So I get like some of the first ones I would see is like, Dynamite Tiger Mask, the early junior division there, and then like, the Super J Cup and stuff like that. So then, that's really what, that's why Tiger Mask is on my arm. Is just really what, that really forged my like permanent love for pro wrestling is that. Because it's like, this is attainable for me. This is where I fit in. This is my lane, So it's kind of like, like to use another sports analogy, like if you're a smaller basketball player in later generations, the land of the giants eventually became a league of point guards. So then, guys like Russell Westbrook, who maybe grew up watching guys like Shaq, then, they see a few guys like Kobe and Allen Iverson. It's like, man, that's the league I want to play in. And now it's his world,
right?
Yeah.
So
it's like,
that is a good analogy.
Yeah. So that's kind of really what it was for me. So.
How long were you in the dojo before you finally get a chance to experience New Japan overseas?
Well, let's see. I came in during the summer of like the tail end of my senior year.
You're still in high school?
Yeah.
When you get booked to go to New Japan?
Well, they couldn't because I was too young to get a visa.
Well, you mean when you started at the dojo?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay, I'm sorry.
They opened up the first one in L.A., or rather, not the first one, but they opened up, a dojo in LA, and so I would go there after school, and then I would spend the summer there. And God, I mean, literally, it's like they were just waiting for me to turn 18. 'Cause I remember as soon as I turned 18, it was September, they were like, all right, here's your tour contract, here's your visa, and your plane ticket, you're going on the October tour. I mean, it was literally weeks later that I, like, as soon as I was able to go, they shipped me off. I mean, and it was like the military, man. I mean, you go from boot camp to being stationed somewhere, I guess. And then it was like another boot camp. And yeah, it was just another experience of right into the fire. So,
Did you come up with Puma before you went over there, or was that something New Japan developed?
that took about a year or two. At first I was just what they call a young boy. And that was just, their authentic way of breaking in people. A lot of the other guys, Rocky, Ricky, and Daniel Bryan, like they were older than me, so their maturity level, we all had about the same level of experience, but their maturity level and having already been like higher on the card as far as American wrestling goes, independent stuff like that, they weren't really a feasible option to try to like strip down and break in that way. So for me, being so young, they were like, we can do the same with you that they did with a lot of guys. Not a lot of guys, but, some of the guys. Like, the way that they brought Benoit up, the way that they brought a lot of the guys into the dojo, and they lived there and really kind of became transplants for their system. And they gave me the same experience. So, carried bags, cooked food, did all that.
Brought in the right way.
Yeah.
So you appreciate it even more once you actually have the chance to do it.
Yeah, going through the airport, somebody was trying to help me with my bags, and instinctively I got my bags and ran up the stairs just because that's just I'm programmed to do stuff like that, like nobody carries my bags but me. Sometimes I'll offer other people. It's just the way it is.
It's an experience you can't buy.
Yeah,
Being broken in that way.
It's a mindset, it's mental strength and discipline.
It's the mindset I think is missing when you look at some of the wrestling schools that there are nowadays, because when you are being taught by guys that have never advanced beyond weekend independence a couple of times a month, how are they going to teach that mentality? How are you going to teach the professional wrestling business when you never really experienced it yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's there's two kind of elements to that. I mean, there's a disciplinary side and a hard work, like dojo training, things like that. And that's very much like being in the military. But then, there's still a different element to it. Like they used to say, you learn wrestling in the back of cars. You know,
Right,
that's also how I learned wrestling. You know, you learn how to do it in the gym a little bit, but you really learn it. Like every time I would ditch school for 3 days or spend a weekend, you know, traveling, jumping, car hopping like that, that's where I really learned.
You sponged it up.
Yeah, and you know, you learn it on the tour bus, you learn it in the vans. That's how you learn it. So you know, I kind of got broken in both those ways. You know, I was disciplined by by New Japan, and I learned you know, the old school way from old school guys.
Best of both worlds. How long were you in Japan, New Japan, as a regular?
Let's see.
Did you ever live there, or were you always traveling back and forth?
I would always kind of go back and forth. I would spend some stretches where it'd be like maybe 3-6 months, maybe. So I kind of had that schedule from 2002 till 2006 or 7, something like that. Yeah.
And in between tours, you were still getting a lot of exposure. I remember you were in, you did at least several shots with TNA when they were down in the first incarnation in Orlando.
Yeah.
Didn't you do some of the B pay-per-views, or?
Yeah. You know, after like my first year, what they do is they send you what's called on an excursion. The young boys will go on an excursion. Usually they'll send you to either Mexico or England. England it's different now. It's not the way it used to be when it was like, you know, World of Sport, or guys would do like the camps and stuff. It's very, wrestling is very unified now. So it's kind of the same style everywhere. But Mexico is still kind of the same. You know, Mexico, Lucha Libre is still Lucha Libre. So, you know, they would send the young boys out to, you know, America. That's when you'd see guys go to WCW or something like that, spend some time there. Obviously, you saw like Okada, for example, in Impact. Guys go to England. I went to Mexico, so they sent me to CMLL. So I was there. Basically, 2003 was my excursion in Mexico. And
But you lived in Mexico full time?
Yeah.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I lived in the Hotel Montemar, a dirty little hotel in Mexico City by the Revolution Monument. And after I got home from that in late 2003, it was like, that was like the start of the indie boom. So like a lot of wrestling had changed. I went into New Japan, and it was like there was just WWF and like the remnants, or you know, whatever, WCW, ECW. That's what the wrestling world was. After the first year, and then CMLL, I came back from Mexico, and it was like Ring of Honor had come up, TNA had come up, and like the independents had started to grow. So there's all this stuff to do. So then my schedule was now divided between all these different things. But it was, you know, it was a wonderful experience being 18, 19 years old and doing, you know, national pay-per-view for Impact, or, you know, big shows for Ring of Honor. It's a fun time.
What was it like down in Mexico? We've had some very different answers from different guests over the years that have been with us here on the show. What was Mexico like for TJP?
I mean, I loved it. It was, Lucha Libre is really like, to me, that's the best wrestling culture. I love Mexican wrestling so much. If I had to pick one, that would be it. And I loved it down there. I mean, I wrestled every single day. You're always in an arena, and you really learn how to be a superstar down there. You know, a lot of people think that it's just about the athletic stuff, the moves, things like that. But I mean, you really learn how to carry yourself, you know, as a performer, and like kind of carve out your niche and who you want to be there, because you're able to apply yourself every single day. So I loved it. I love you know, the style of it and all the nuances and stuff. So yeah, for me it was you know, a little bit of heaven.
And then from Mexico, you started doing a little Ring of Honor. You started doing a little bit more Impact from time to time before that long stay you had a decade later. But what were your initial impressions of going to work with Ring of Honor? I think you were there a little sporadically at first, right?
Yeah, I always kind of looked at it as like, I still kind of see it this way. Not in its current form, but that time anyway, is like, it kind of was the supplement for what the void that ECW left when it went out, you know?
I can see that. Yeah.
Obviously, there's some similarities, like same region, and a lot of the same people involved in ECW as a project were involved in Ring of Honor. You know, Gabe Sapolsky, for example. A lot of guys that were utilized were guys that I feel like would be earmarked for ECW had they still been around. You know, they're very much prided themselves on being the alternative in wrestling at that time. You know, so that's kind of how I saw it. Was that I didn't really, other than that, I didn't really have. I was kind of indifferent to any place I would go. I just kind of took it all in and tried to have fun.
I think you're right as far as with the ECW and Ring of Honor statement. Especially if ECW was ever able to obtain another national contract, how far could you go with the blood and the guts on many cable TV stations? You know what I mean?
Well,
if you look at where the in-ring product has kind of gone over the past 20 years, I think you would, maybe out of necessity, you would have need to have gone to a more unique hybrid in-ring style as opposed to thumbtacks, blood, and fire and things like that.
I feel like it was the natural progression for ECW had ECW stayed around.
Right.
You know, I think that's kind of why it was formed. You know, perhaps that's the direction they would have headed in. But, you know, you had guys like Guerrero, Malenko, you know, that were, you know, Tajiri, Psychosis, Ray, that were putting on matches that, you know, felt like that is what Ring of Honor sort of made their foundation on those types of guys. So, you know, you when you think about it, like to me, I feel like it's a natural fit to have seen like a CM Punk or a Colt Cabana or like the Briscoes, you know, Bryan Danielson in ECW had they continued on into that like timeline. You know, just they would be seamless fits for that atmosphere.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been interesting to see an ECW that was a little bit less extreme as far as the weapons and things like that went, to see how fans might have reacted to that. I'm sure it would have been, you know, it would have taken a little re-education to the diehards down in Philadelphia for it to not be, you know, that violence that they thirsted over so much. But it would, again, retcon, as you said, as we talked about earlier in the show. But,
yeah.
Did you have a preference, TNA, Ring of Honor? Or did you enjoy working both over the years?
You know, I feel like I always really enjoyed TNA a lot. And really what I think it came down to was the locker room is always been so great there. Like, there's always such good camaraderie there, and guys are always really happy there. Like, there's, you know, people have their individual stances and gripes with, say, like, management in any place. And I feel like any time that there was something negative with TNA or you know, that place, the atmosphere, it was really just like a peer to management type of thing. Like the locker room was always amazing there. And that, to me, that's always the most important thing. Because if you're not happy and you're not having fun, it's just not worth doing, you know.
Right, and that's not just wrestling, that's if you sell shoes or any avenue in life.
And that's not to say that other locker rooms were bad or negative, because they're not. But TNA always had you know, a really exceptional camaraderie to it. Everybody I always felt was really good there. And you know, to this day they still got the magic. They have a great locker room still, and I love it there.
That's great, and the fact that even in 2020 now you're still being able to be active within the organization. Now it's got that little tweak of the name that I'm still trying to get used to calling it Impact. It'll always be TNA to me, I guess.
We all would like it to be TNA again too.
Yeah, everybody loves a little TNA, I guess. But you know, before we go to the break, you had mentioned a couple times now in the story, you at one point, you became homeless in your journey in professional wrestling. With someone that was so skilled, that had so much to offer the industry. How did that come to be?
Bet the farm, man. I mean,
do you remember the year, the time?
Yeah, it was really just a perfect storm of elements, because it was about 2008, 9. So I was like homeless in like 09, 10, around that time. And I mean, it was really just, you know, like I've always been, like we said, like my upbringing in wrestling. It all in 100%. If I was told to do something, I'd do it. And a lot of that was ingrained in me from New Japan, like to always do the work. And I always believed in, you know, you got to get out of your own backyard. You got to go after your opportunities. They're not going to knock on your door. You have to knock on their door. And so when I was told, maybe you should go to Florida and try to pursue opportunities with WWE that way, didn't have to be told half of once to pack up the car and do it. But, you're betting the farm. So, walking on at FCW and going into camp there, I have to leave all my other wrestling jobs behind. And I did. And the world is full of really talented guys. The Kevin Steens and Genericos and Young Bucks of the world were all coming up at that time. The Adam Coles, all these different guys. And, those spots don't stay open in Ring of Honor, Impact,
Right.
New Japan, wherever. And the opportunity didn't pan out. The recession hit. I couldn't get my old jobs back. And I was a 23-year-old young man with no secondary education and zero work experience in anything. So, it's just a perfect storm of, anything that could go wrong did go wrong.
So were you in Florida when it happened?
Yeah.
The Tampa, or were you in the
Tampa. Tampa.
Were you still able to work wrestling events, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally just starting all over again. Even the
Wow.
big indies, their spots, their cards were all full. And they're like, the new generation is in, and so for me, it was back to doing, the same type of shows I would do when I was, 13 years old. I would do these, bar shows on like Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and then some like Legion Hall type shows on like Fridays, Saturdays locally for $10, $15, just enough to eat that day.
So was it you couldn't even get back to California? It was that tough?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That was primarily the reason why I was out there for more than a year was because I literally couldn't put away a few $100s just to drive home. That was
Really?
the tough part.
Yeah.
And during that time, like when that recession hit, my parents split up. They lost their house. They went.
Oh, wow.
They filed for bankruptcy. They were homeless too. My dad lived in a trailer in a field for like a year. My mom lost her job with the airline and had trouble getting a regular like minimum wage job. She eventually got a job as a barista like almost a year later.
Wow.
She had to move in with a friend for a short amount of time, and so was couch surfing herself, and so I didn't have a home to go back to either. That was also an
Another
issue.
problem, right?
Yeah.
It's like you said, a perfect storm. It wasn't just you. It was, family members at the same time were going through some challenges.
Yeah, and it was one of those things like without all those details, and there's a lot more too. I think a lot of the narrative of it, like people assume that it was when I was like young and in wrestling school that I was like, that's what I'm referring to. And that wasn't the case. Like, I wish it was as easy as me having been like a young adult, like, no, mom, dad, I want to wrestle. I'm going to sleep in my car and eat ramen and I'm not going to come back until I make it. Like, I wish that was the problem. Like, I didn't even want to wrestle anymore. Like, I used to pray to God, like, I don't want this. Don't make me do this. Please.
You were ready to give up on the business.
Yeah, please just let me get any job, pumping gas, janitor at a high school. I applied everywhere, and I couldn't get a job anywhere. And it felt like, cause I was raised Catholic. I'm a very religious person. It just felt like every single night I was having the same conversation. God, I don't want this, and the only way I can eat every day, you're making me you don't want me to wrestle. If you did, then you would have me doing it the way that I had been doing it for 10 years, but I'm not. So you don't want me to be doing that. Don't make me do it like this just so I can not starve to death. Just let me be something else. Let me clean pools. I don't care.
Must have eaten away at you mentally.
I mean, you just kind of wonder why, but I think like,
And this was, you said it was a year?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably, we spent an entire summer where we were like truly homeless, where there wasn't a place to go. I remember sleeping in laundromats and stuff like that.
Really? Sleeping in laundromats? Wow.
Yeah, first couple nights I remember very specifically. I didn't know, that was my quick fix. Like when they put the steel boot on the door handle when you're evicted. I remember sleeping in the laundromat of the apartment complex for the first night. And then down the street there was like a laundromat by like a Papa John's or something like that. And I just slept there the second night. And then it would be like, you answer room for rent ads and then skip out in the morning. And,
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so just whatever I could do to get a roof,
So there was a time, there was no home. There wasn't
Oh yeah,
bouncing
like,
from place to place.
Literally
There was
nothing for a little bit.
Isn't that, who would have ever thought that two former WWE superstars would come to the studio? I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Atlas's story, but he was homeless for a period too,
Yeah,
not too far removed from a big run on national television. And yours, it's almost on the opposite end. Before you really got that, where you were known as a national television star, you're trying to struggle for survival in a state that was, somewhat new to you and with nowhere to go.
Yeah, it was tough, and I remember I did nail down a small room for rent, splitting with some complete stranger, and after a few weeks, or after a couple of days, we had no power, so we went like 2 or 3 weeks without power in the middle of summer. I remember showering by candlelight, and police kicked the door in one morning at 7 or 8 a.m. It turns out that whoever we were renting from, it was a foreclosure. So we were technically squatting.
You had no right to even be in the home.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be rented out in the first place, or sublet, I guess. So we were kicked out, and I was homeless again for a little bit, and then thankfully I got to couch surf on Sal from Evolves. He had a townhouse that was vacant, and let me kind of stay there and pay rent as I go, and
good.
got me off my ass a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just there's a reason for everything, and now like the back half of my career, that 10 years before that led to that, and then the next 10 years after it, it's like mirrored. All the same places I went again in the same order, just about, and now like I have this new platform to be able to speak about my culture, my heritage, and do better things with it. I really kind of think that maybe it was God's way of saying, I gave you all these gifts when you're young and you wasted it. It's not enough to just be good at it and have fun. Like you have a purpose, and I don't know, I just felt like now that I know what it is, that happened for a reason. He took it from me for a reason, but he wouldn't let it, he kept me in it for a reason too. So every day I would beg him, like, please, I hate this, don't make me do it anymore. It's like, no, I just want you to see how you can do it a different way. So.
Well, you know what, hopefully there's going to be a lot of young people, whether they're trying to get involved in professional wrestling or not, that'll hear this story and say, you know what, you're going to run into your bumps in the roads. There are going to be difficult times, but look at how things have turned out for you. You survived. Hopefully, knock on wood, will be the worst challenges you've had to face. Hopefully it doesn't get any worse than that. I wouldn't want to see what the earth would look like at that point.
Yeah,
and, really do something fantastic with yourself is look at where you are right now.
Yeah,
So there's always hope, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, everybody has an Everest, as they say. So, I think it was just all about finding mine. And, hopefully I'm inspiring others to make the best of whatever they do, even if it's not wrestling, that's really been my goal.
I mean, it doesn't have to apply just to professional wrestling, but it's certainly easy to resonate if it's someone going through the stress and the challenges that I think almost everybody goes through at some point when they get involved in this craziness.
Yeah, that's the goal.
There you go. All right, wrestling fans, there's no way we could cover everything there is to go over in this man's career. These are just a couple of newspaper headlines. We're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the show.